We've got an interesting question for you this week, and it is this. How do you get clients to hire you for strategic foundational work when they just want execution? I love this question because it's a really good one and it's really relevant and it comes up a lot. And P-Dog, I am tossing it to you.
It's funny. I'm very happy to answer, but I also just want to say for the record, I feel like of all the people I know in the business world, you are the perfect person to talk to about this because I feel like this is kind of at the crux of what you do and what you help people do. So if you're listening and you're like, oh, I love this question, go and join Amy's list because her emails are effectively always about some element of this. That aside, so I feel like there's so many things I want to say here. This, for me, can be a red flag. It depends where it's coming from, I think, from the client. If it's coming from a lack of understanding about what their best investment is, and the fact that I think no matter what your skill set is, the thing that they are hiring you to do is simply like an asset that is designed to get an outcome. I think if the client doesn't understand that, there's definitely space for education, right? Because the point, for example, of, good copy isn't that you have words on a page, it's that the person reading it takes a certain action. The purpose of, for another example, like good podcast editing isn't that, you have something that you can just push out to the world. It's that your listener gets a really smooth experience and your points as the person on the podcast, they get made a lot clearer. So I think helping a client see if they're stuck in the idea of execution, that actually the value is in what this thing can actually do for your business. So without strategy, there's no point. You're effectively throwing money down a drain. That's kind of my starting point, but I guess I would love to hear from you, Amy, and then I suspect we should probably dive into like what this process of education can actually look like in a conversation with a client. But Amy, expert that you are, tell me your thoughts.
Yes, let me just put on my little wisdom cap. No, so I think there's a couple of points to tease out here at first. And one is, when you're newer to your business, very often you are executing as opposed to being strategic. And I'm not saying that's good, bad, indifferent. You should do that. You need to do that. And I'm not saying any of that, but that's often what happens, right? You start something, you're good at something, you hang out your shingle, you work with different people in different ways. And very often, it's somebody comes to you and they need an X and you say, yes, I can deliver an X. It'll take me this long and cost you that much. I think what happens as you evolve your business is, so once you've done X a couple of times, you're like, and even if you've been taught in your training and learning, even if you've been taught that, you may need to do a certain amount of research or there may be certain strategy you want to bring to the table. I think very often when you're new, there's so much coming at you that you just say yes and you do a thing. So I think this is sometimes moving from being brand new to the next level of your business, where you're realizing that you want to be more involved in the strategy because executing at some point just isn't as interesting. It's not as interesting and it's not as effective. And so you don't want to be that person. And it's also, I mean, it's the difference between the order taker and the expert, quite frankly, right? The person who says, yes, I can do that. Here's what it'll cost you versus the person who says, great. Yeah. Like, tell me what's up. Like, why do you need an X? What's going on in your business? What's going on right now that we're talking? What's gone on historically? Have you had an X before? How have you used it? How has it worked? Why is it not working? Or is it still working and this is just a new initiative? And you start to ask questions and find out what they're all about. What's the genesis of this whole thing? And that's the beginning of sort of starting to work in a more strategic way. Now, there are clients, if they don't want to hear that from you, for me, that's not a good client. That's not an interesting client. It's not somebody that I would necessarily want to work with. Now, that said, they could have their place in your roster. I mean, it might be someone who wants an X and like you think, I can do that and I can do it relatively easily. And I'm happy to make the money doing that, but it's not your business model. The risk there, however, is that you can get trapped in that model. And I see it all the time where people get trapped in that. And it can become a question of you start to doubt yourself if you're not using the depth of your skills. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Kirsty, because I don't want to go too far down this path without hearing what you think, because I think there's a certain point at which this is, you have to decide if this is the kind of client you want to work with and whether or not it's a fit, or whether or not this could be a red flag and they don't really want your expertise. Give me a touch point from you.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you've shared. And it was interesting too, because as you were speaking, I realized that I think I probably possibly misinterpreted the question because I heard you speak about like the strategy as being separate from the execution. And of course, that's a possibility as well. The way I was thinking about it was a client who is resistant to the idea of
Mm.
you building strategy into the thing that you provide. So just to flag that there could be two different ways that we could take this. But yes, Amy, back to your point. I agree. I think when you are starting out, so often you're just really excited that someone wants to hire you to do a thing. So you're like, yes, like let me build a website for you without taking the time, or I guess having the confidence or the wherewithal to ask the questions that will give you the more strategic insights. So for example, rather than like, yes, I can build you a website, it's like, great, like what do you want this website to do? What action do you want people to take when they land there? How is this going to support your business? So without getting into that stuff, and therefore I think quite naturally positioning yourself through that conversation and through that process as someone who is more than just like, you know, the order taker and the doer. Like you're actually a strategic partner because you're helping your prospect consider this asset from a more grounded foundational place. So I think that is quite a natural sort of progression in business, that you start off maybe not doing that, but then you realize after working with a few clients or perhaps being exposed to different programs or different peers that like, oh, this is something I should really be considering because it adds interest and weight to my work. It adds value for the client, and therefore it's a really great way to get paid more because your work is of higher importance and higher impact. So I think we're agreed on that part, or perhaps sorry, I'm not sure why I'm doing evil hands.
No, I think we are agreed on that part. But but looking at this question, so okay, if someone's saying
Mm,
how to get clients to hire you for strategic foundational work when they just want execution. So, I mean, back to your initial point, and I think it behooves us to talk about how do you educate somebody?
mm,
I mean, is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about educating someone? And I'm of two minds about that. It can be hard if somebody doesn't understand the value of what they're buying. And that doesn't mean that you can't explain the value of what you're buying, but you aren't necessarily going to get buy-in from them on that.
yes. And I suspect it's pretty easy, or maybe I'm only saying this with the benefit of experience, but I think it's quite easy to tell whether you're speaking with a prospect who is willing to like, you know, have their blind spot removed and understand things from your perspective, and they're really eager for the learning because they really, really want to make a good investment, versus a prospect who is just like, no, I'm just here because I want X, and like, I don't care what you say, this is what I want. I want to find someone who's just happy to blindly deliver on that. Would you agree with there being sort of two different types of people?
Oh, I would absolutely agree. And I think that's what I was getting at earlier a little bit about it being a red flag. I mean, it's a red
Mm,
flag if you don't want to just execute, right? If you don't want to just create a whatever without being strategic and without doing some of the foundational work. So yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I think and that's actually it's a good point that you're making, because it can be very easy for me to dismiss like, oh, well, they don't understand how to buy what you sell, and but I think, and I've been in that conversation many times where it's like, well, let's unpack this a little bit and talk about, the results you're after and how we can think about this. And you can tell pretty quickly whether someone's like leaning in and going, oh, wow, oh, I feel like I found somebody who really understands me and wants to help me and knows way more than I do, and this is fabulous. Come into my room, or whether it's like, oh my God, I don't want to hear what you're going to say.
yes.
So yeah, point very well taken. So let's talk about that. Like, how do you approach that? How do you educate someone about what they need or what you do or how it all works?
I mean, I think a lot of it can come from first asking them questions to better understand why they are looking for someone to execute on this thing, right? Because you sort of want to help them see for themselves, ideally, or articulate that well, I want this because I want X to happen. It's like, yes, great. So let's talk about this. Like, so I think asking them questions is always the best place to start. And it could be as simple as, like, let's use the example of a website, because I know we've referenced that a few times in this episode. If someone does come to you and is like, hey, like, I want a new website, like, can you write me a homepage, an about page, and a service page? There, I think it's your job to say, oh, like, how exciting that you're after a new website. Can you tell me, like, what's led to you wanting someone else to write this website for you? Like, let's start there, because I think then you're starting to create space for their story, for their strategy, and for their goals. And I think once you have an ability to see how your potential piece of the project is going to help them reach those goals, you then have an opportunity to educate them about the strategy that is inherent in that process. But what's your take, Amy? Because I know that you are, again, as I mentioned at the start of this episode, you are the expert in this. I would love to hear what your go-to is in this scenario.
Same as you. I mean, it's absolutely asking questions and like let's dig down and find out what they're really trying to achieve. And then I feel like it's my job, or the person who is in that seat's job, to talk about ways that that can be achieved. Because yes, I mean, there's the homepage. I mean, like continuing with this example, I mean, yes, those are like actual deliverables that you can create, but there's a lot of ways that you can do them. And there are things I need to know in order to do them effectively. Like why are you doing this, and what do you have now, and how's it working, and what's changed, and what do you want to happen? What is the purpose of doing this? What are you needing people to do? What are you wanting them to do? Why these pages? Why now? I mean, all of those things. So I think that's the conversation that you want to be in with people, and then to be able to tell them, to explain, okay, so in order to, and they may have ready answers and they may not. And one of the things that we know from experience is your ready answers aren't always the right answers, right? Like we often think, I mean, and this is universal, goes for all of us. I mean, we think we know things about our audience or about our market that are often assumptions, right? Or what we think we know and not what may actually be true. And so a good practitioner needs to dig down and find out what's really true to create something effective that those particular people will respond to, right? Because this is, the more it's not about surmise and the more it's based on fact, the better it's going to be. And people may not know that, and they may, I mean, I think we all to some extent like think we know things that, may or may not be true, or may or may not be true anymore in a business. So yes, I think that's absolutely the way that you do that. And my feeling too is this is how you sort people as well, right? Like this is where you're generous with your expertise. I mean, there's some things that come before that, because obviously you don't want to get on, into meetings and be sharing your expertise with just anybody. So I mean, there's some qualifying things, and that's not the purpose of this call. But I just want to say that just to, you know, let people know I'm not suggesting just go and talk about what you do for free. You want to explain how these things work, why it matters, why it's important. I mean, and I would say that to clients in that kind of context. I would say, it's so funny, like what we think we know about them may not be true. Like you may think people buy this product because they're trying to like, solve or satiate this particular thing. And in fact, it could be totally different. And so we want to talk to those people and ask them and find out what they actually think. That's an important part of the process for me, because if I'm going to deliver something for you that I feel confident will be effective, there's some things I need to know. And so, we get deeper into that conversation. The other piece of this, though, I think, and I would love to know what you think, is you want to fish in ponds where people buy what you sell, and ideally where people already understand this. Not that I don't think that there's value in educating people, but I think when you have to educate somebody about the value, you also have to educate them about the price, because those things often go hand in hand. And people, because the more strategic work is deeper work, and it's more expensive work because it's more time consuming work. It comes from experience, and experience costs more. So I think educating people to some extent is good. I think in some cases it can be like, a headbanger. It just can be. So I think that you want to be aware of that. What do you think on that?
Yeah, and I love that you brought up pricing, because that was going to be my next point. I feel like pricing will often weed these people out too, because if someone thinks they're simply paying for like a piece of execution without any thought or any real value behind it, they're going to expect to be paying a really low price. So I think that that's a really important piece of the puzzle, because people who are willing to pay a higher price and invest more are going to be expecting that there's going to be this strategic foundational work sitting behind it, right? So I will say though, like, yes, 100% to fishing. What's your analogy? Fishing in the ponds where the right
Where
fish
people
are?
buy what you sell.
Much better. Yes, that. Yes, 100%. And I would say that it's like still you can get like someone can end up in your pond who perhaps, isn't ready yet to work with you. And back when I worked as a launch copywriter, I did have, I can think of 3 clients who I ended up working with like 12 or 18 months after our initial contact, where I had this conversation and I ended up being very open and saying, you're just not ready for this work. Like, you don't have the information that I would need to create a really high value launch for you. And I would feel sick if you paid me $15,000 and you didn't have the business or the assets behind that to actually make that an investment that you earn back multiple times over. I would love to keep in touch and then, come back and, and those clients did, right? And we ended up really like, we made some great money together. So I think that there are some clients for whom it's a red flag. They're just a poor fit. They're never going to come to you. You're never going to enjoy working with them. So like flee, and they're going to be resistant to your pricing as well. So that kind of sorts itself out. There are others for whom the education piece is so enlightening and it sets them off on a track where they are able to ready themselves for working with you in a really successful way, months or years later. So just to put that in there too, because I think ideally, of course, you're only having conversations with, perfect fit prospects. But I think the reality is for almost every business owner out there, you're going to get some people who are not a perfect fit in your pipeline.
Always. And I think that's where, being generous with your expertise and, and talking to people honestly about what's involved. And even, like you said, saying, you're not ready for this yet. And I don't want you to be spending the money or investing here where I don't see a return. And I think any of us who have been around for any length of time had those people who have come back later and been amazing clients. You reminded me, I saw an email last week from a client of mine that I'm in touch with periodically, but I probably haven't worked with in 7 or 8 years. And they just recently started doing email marketing, which I've been sort of intrigued by, right? Because it's like, oh, what are they doing now? And I looked and I clicked on one of their links and I went to the website and it was still copy that I had written all these years later. And these are really savvy business people, so they would not be keeping that if it didn't work. And I just felt so good about it. But the thing is, they were one of those clients. They came to me probably 2 years in advance of when we worked together. And they just said, yeah, I mean, they knew they weren't ready. They were like, no, we're not ready for that. We're not ready for that depth of work. We're not ready for that kind of budget. They just weren't. And I kept in touch with them over time. And when they were ready, they came to me and they spent a lot of money and we worked together for a lot of years. And it was really rewarding. And they were people I just really, really enjoyed. But I enjoyed talking to them that initial time. And I spent a lot of time explaining things to them and how things worked and how I worked. And they were very appreciative of it. And the funny thing is, you don't know. Right. You don't really know. Like you can get like sort of get a vibe or you get a sense or you think it was like a, a good call, a good connect. But like you're planting seeds. You're always planting seeds. And I think it's just so worth being generous and being gracious and helping people out because it's just a good way to do business. It's a good way to build your reputation. And those things come back and you'll need clients in 6 months and in 12 months and in 2 years. And you're planting seeds and some of them will bear fruit. And if they don't, they're bearing fruit for them because you were able to help them in some other way, which I think in the grand scheme of things, I think it's just a good way to do business and it feels good for everyone. So on that note, have we covered everything or?
The last little tip I just want to pop in here. So framing is a skill that I'm forever teaching people inside of Comms Camp. And it's the best skill because it's for everything, right? It's about positioning your offers, but also positioning touch points in your business. And I think when you're starting out, it can be a really easy trap to fall into to think that any sort of like discovery or sales call is about them telling you what they want and you saying, yes, here's how much it's going to cost and here's when I can do it. But I think if you're really mindful and you really like actively take the position and you communicate this in your framing of the call. So you're setting expectations that like, thanks so much for making the time to chat today. The whole idea of us meeting is that we both get a really good sense of whether we're a good fit to work together. Because I think if you can frame the call with something like that to start with, then it makes it so much more easy and so much more natural for either of you at any point to be like, you know what, I'm not feeling this is good, right? So I think that can empower you to make that call and communicate that information, and also can give context to you asking the kinds of questions that we were speaking about earlier, right? So that they're kind of expecting there's going to be a back and forth and there's going to be a feeling out of each other. It also frees them up to ask questions too. But anyway, I'm veering off into sales call strategy now. So
I think it's a good point. I think it's a piece of this. And I think it's the piece of this, sort of educating people, goodwill, being strategic, in your business about how you operate. And I think the other thing that's really good about what you just said is that's when you really own the thing. When you get to the point where it's not just about them making a decision, it's about both of you making a decision, whether you're going to collaborate or not is not up to them uniquely, right? It's up to you too. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, because if you're not there yet, if you stay with this, you will be there. And like the way that you build the confidence and the way you build those chops is by doing it. But I think, what you just outlined there is like exactly like how it should work. If it doesn't work now, it's how it'll work eventually. So I think that was a fine note.
Excellent. Well, on that fine note, let us wrap up. I really hope that there's been something here that's been really useful for you. Like I said at the start, get on Amy's list if this is something that you are sort of battling with at the moment. She always has great tips and examples around this. But if you have a question that you'd like us to dive into on a future episode, either related to this or something completely left of center, we would love to hear it. So head on over to businessbadass.co and ask the question there. And also, if you're in the mood and if you feel like this is a great podcast episode that you've got something from, please leave us a review or give us a share. It would really mean the world to us.
Indeed, it would. Thanks for being here. We'll catch you next time.
If you've enjoyed listening to us share our insights on this episode and you want more, head to the links in the show notes to find where you can sign up to be on our newsletters. So Amy's newsletter delivers weekly insights on how to build and grow a sustainable business that fills your coffers and feeds your soul. And my newsletter is all about optimizing your communication skills and habits. So the link in the show notes will take you to my assessment that will help you pinpoint your communication style and give you some strategies to improve and optimize things this week.